everyone, and welcome. I am Thais Skogstad, Director of Product Marketing here at Data.World, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, let's quickly spin through some housekeeping. You are probably already familiar with most of this, so I'll go very quick. First off, this is a pre-recorded broadcast. That means you'll be able to enjoy a presentation that's free from technical difficulties or unexpected interruptions. It also means you'll be able to chat with our speakers throughout the broadcast. They're both logged in and eager to hear from you. Just reach out using the Q&A and chat buttons on your screen. Also, this webinar will be available for on-demand replay in about 24 hours. You'll receive an email with the link, just in case you missed any of this or want to share with colleagues. We also have some excellent resources available for you to check out in the console below. We are thrilled to be joined by Amy Neiman, VP of Client Services, and Stuart Corver, Director of Sales Engineering at Data.World. Today, they will discuss ways that data catalogs can deliver business value across a variety of use cases by bridging the growing divide between business and technical people who need access to critical data. And again, both Amy and Stuart are here to answer any questions in the Q&A and chat. You might all be muted, but we would love to hear from you. Share your own examples, suggestions, questions, or whatever you'd like to contribute to the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. We are glad to have you and hope you find this hour interesting and inspiring.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Amy Neiman, VP of Client Services here at Data.World, and with me today is Stuart Corver.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with you.
We have been looking forward to today's discussion about use cases and data catalog for quite some time. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. Stuart and I have traveled a lot seeing clients when you could travel, and one thing that I've always enjoyed when I visit new cities is looking at libraries and going and visit it. They are amazing structures. Two of my favorite are New York City. The first one is Midtown Library by Bryant Park. If you ever go inside, it's huge and massive, super organized. Everything's accessible and very welcoming. That Rose Reading Room is a great place to visit. The second is the Morgan Library, which has a totally different vibe. The scope and shape and tailored experience that they created for that audience is different, but also equally important to visit. I bring up libraries because if you think about it, a data catalog is a reference for data, much like a card catalog is in a library. A library card catalog helps a reader select and locate books that be important to them as they do a research project. It provides a lot of useful facts about books, such as the author's name, the topic, publication date, publisher, the book description, maybe even the Dewey Decimal System, all there so you can find the book on whatever shelf it needs to be on. Similarly, a data catalog contains useful information about data assets. A data format, the location of the data, maybe the size and shape, along with related assets or the collaboration pieces that are needed and the crowdsourcing capabilities. Now reflect on the universal experience about going to your college library to do research for a paper that's due tomorrow. It's a huge relief when you can find that source that works well, but sometimes you're forced to settle for the less than sources, ones that you can't really find or you need. You might need something from history or something from the biography section or geography. You run around and trying to track them down. Now, the difference between the two are the stakes. When people settle for less than data sources or even forego them entirely in your business, there's huge implications. And there's a growing need for data. So to help things go right, Stuart's going to walk us through common use cases for data catalog in the market that we see every day.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Stuart Corver. I'm going to be walking you through a few use cases. As the head of sales engineering here at Data.World, I spend every waking moment of my working life talking to companies like yours about how they can implement data catalogs and what types of use cases they can successfully deploy. So I'm going to walk you through 4 key use case themes that we see every day, and we're going to talk about some key aspects of them. So of course, there's a ton of them. There's more than 4 that I'm going to that are even out there, but I'm going to focus really on what are the most common ones that we see organizations talking about every single day. So the first one that we're going to talk about is data literacy and alignment. Now, why do we talk about this first? I'm really starting at the lowest level of maturity for organizations. Is just culturally trying to get a handle on, knowing about data and aligning about its meaning. And the reason a lot of organizations are doing this when they're not at a particularly mature rate is because they identify with these statistics you see here. Maybe many of you do as well. 3/4 of companies admit they have not forged a data culture and cannot really claim to be data-driven. Majorities of companies admit they can't really leverage analytics and data and don't really treat data with the seriousness that it deserves. So let's do a little bit of definition here for those of you that don't use these terms every day. Data literacy is all about a widespread understanding, so a culturally implicit, widespread understanding of what data you have, where you have it, why you have it, who knows about it, and even how it should be leveraged for insights. This is really important, that people not just say, I don't know, it just shows up in my spreadsheet, but that people begin to really understand how data is transformed, how it's used, and how the variations in that really have implications for the organization. And then alignment is that companion piece to say, are we talking about the same data when we talk about the same things? Do we have a common definition? When I say net new sales and you say net new sales, do we mean the same thing? Do we pull data in the same way from the same sources? Or is there is there variations to that? So that's a huge issue for a lot of companies. The mistreatment of data is almost always because people see something that looks like it's named like something they're interested in, but actually there's maybe significant misalignment. So we're going to talk a bit about that in this first use case. And for a lot of organizations, where they want to start. They want to get on the same page. They want to get their organization thinking about data, thinking in data, and really, making those decisions with a clear understanding of what data they're looking at and why. So for each of these use cases, I want to talk about what's a good first use case. So if your organization is trying to establish data literacy and get some data alignment, many of them start at the top. So a good example, and there are lots of them, is I hear companies all the time say, these 20 metrics run our entire business. If we can't align around the definition, the calculation, the source of these metrics, we're lost. But the honest truth is, the reason we're having this conversation is many of them are struggling actively to just keep everyone on the same page about the most fundamental measures of their business. Now, remember, you don't have to have a use case that spans the entirety of your enterprise, right? This might be the same analogy within your department to say, for us to work successfully as a business unit, we must align on exactly what we measure to be successful, how we measure it, and never falter from that. And then everything else we will do with our data literacy will be built off of those important pieces, right? So that's a really kind of key thing to understand. So critical data element definition is a really good first place to start and can produce some really good artifacts about what data we have and how we produce it in the most important metrics to your part of the business. Along with these first use cases, I want to always talk about who cares about this stuff. It's a casual question with a really important answer, right? Who cares? Now, data literacy and alignment is often driven by senior leadership, strategic leaders, either again at the enterprise level or within your business unit, who know that you need to adapt to be more data-driven to survive in this world, right? And that's a really important distinction to understand, because this is a very foundational step for organizations. And those foundational steps don't have necessarily as much clear ROI. We might not be solving a specific business problem with dollars tied to it. This is really for organizations that say this is an imperative, right? And of course, we have fundamentally agree that these are always imperatives, but again, within organizations, there's going to be different cultures around that. So cultures that really understand this change, this transformation, that's really who's buying into the concepts, who will be really receptive to how you can use a data catalog to make your organization more data literate and more aligned. And of course, you see a simple screenshot here of just how you can use a data catalog to publish not only the definitions and the attributions of what makes a metric, but also what data elements actually relate to it. Now, the second piece we're going to talk about, maybe the most common data catalog use case, is around data discovery and awareness. You have all kinds of data living in all kinds of sources, in all kinds of repositories. You might buy data from the outside. You might use public data. You produce your own data. Some of it's easier to get to than others. You likely know about the data within your silo, but have no idea what others may have. And this is the most common use case that we see every day, is how do I get a better picture of what we have? So I call this very simply, on one hand, unlike maybe the initial case where you completely not data savvy, you understand at least some key facts. One, we produce lots of data that might be interesting to people. And two, we have lots of people who want to use that data to answer business questions. But in between lies the gap, right? And the gap is what really inhibits organizations from really moving their analytical capabilities, their ability to drive insights forward faster. It's because there is a fog between data consumers and data producers. And this is really what data catalogs were originally designed to do, right? This is that core of the use case. A catalog, the paper version of it, is all about, can I see what's on offer and learn how to buy it, right? And in the exact same way, a data catalog is, can I see what data is available and how can I get access to it? Now, what's a good first use case for data discovery and awareness, right? And one thing we'll advocate for, and Amy will certainly talk about this a little more later in the session, is we're really advocating for, it's always unique to your business. There is no just panacea. There's no universal answer here. You want to be looking for specific business unit impact. So, and I like to call it earning the right to change your company with that initial business unit impact. Solve something impactful to say, we have wasted tons of time and money and resource over and over again, recreating or trudging or treading water through the same problems, right? And we're going to solve this problem. And that problem should ideally, one, be specific and obvious to the business. Your first use case for discovery should not be something esoteric or even just a million columns brought into a data catalog, right? It needs to be specifically a business problem that when you solve it, the business will go, yes, this is great. And it needs to be tied to a return on investment, so some bottom line element as much as humanly possible, or failing that, key corporate initiatives. And those corporate initiatives don't have to be data centric. They don't have to be data initiatives, but just the key corporate initiatives of what your organization is trying to achieve in that given fiscal year or 5-year plan, and aligning yourself to those will really help, again, ensure that the impact that greater data discovery and awareness will make. It also should involve a limited number of technologies. That's one way to just run aground, is trying to find all the appropriate technical people and technical things. Really try to hit hard with the solution to the business problem, not casting a huge wide net. And it really should produce a tangible, what I like to call show pony result, because you're going to want to trot that use case around the entire organization, ideally, to then advocate for greater data discovery and awareness across silos. So that's really kind of what we think about. And that is really that specific business unit impact. And to have that in mind, it cannot just be a technical answer. It cannot just be a capability. Really, ideally, want to be looking for a business problem that meets these criteria. Because the goal, as you see on the right, is that beautiful fantasy for many of you that is not a reality today, that you start typing in a term or a word or a subject that you understand into the data catalog, and copious numbers of analytical resources come back according to all kinds of different dimensions. And so trying to get your organization to understand that better future that we can enable. Now, who cares about this use case? Well, I like to think of this as a grassroots effort, right? This is all about the frustrated data consumers and data producers. the core audience for a data catalog, certainly, right? These are the people wasting time just trying to find and clean data on the one side, right? You have the consumers who are just trying to find that data and make it work for their purposes. And then on the data producers, the data owners, the people who actually kind of have and shepherd that data, or the SMEs that understand it, they get tired of answering the same questions over and over again and trying to direct people to the most up-to-date sources of the data that they produce. And so this is really important. These are the people that care, the people that you need to serve, the people that will help you carry the flag of the data catalog and the transformational change it can enable to the rest of the business. All right, let's move on to use case number 3. Of course, for many of you, you may have titles related to data governance and data protection, and that also intersects the data catalog, right? We want organizations to understand there are heavy regulatory environments for some of your businesses, whether that might be healthcare or the government or financial services organizations, or your organization may be focused on new incremental regulations like CCPA or GDPR. And so it's important to understand how to successfully execute use cases in a data catalog related to data governance and data protection. So when we talk about a good first use case around this, is almost always to find, organizations are looking to find what sensitive data they have and classify it. Now, I have some concerns when that is the only use case that is happening inside of a data catalog. One, because it leaves a lot of money on the table, a lot of benefit to the organization, a lot of value. But we understand that most of the funded data governance and data protection initiatives focus on especially personal data and information that's highly regulated. And the goals are, as you see here, to get that map level understanding of what do we have and where do we have it and what are we doing with it, and then ensure that all the appropriate protections and approval workflows in place. Now, the key difference here between this and the other data catalog use cases that we're going to talk about is that who cares about this is unique. This stuff, let's be perfectly honest, within the internal workings of your organization is most cared about by your leadership based on risk and compliance officers and what the lawyers tell them needs to be done to comply. This is not stuff that drives a lot of fans and interest and go-getter proactive work from the data analyst community, right? Everybody wants to be responsible, but getting people to do the work necessary for this is one of the real challenges in sustaining data governance and protection use cases. Because most knowledge workers, this is not their day job. This is not what they get paid to do. And they don't meaningfully benefit in their minds. There's no immediate payback other than their organization stays on the good side of the law and out of the newspapers. Of course, that's super important. But for those individuals who are tasked with producing reports, these are often seen as barriers and extra. And so it's really, really important when you look at your first use cases, I would say honestly, to combine it with some of the other use case themes that we've talked about not just getting the data experts to just classify things and mark things as sensitive and put up barriers to accessing it, but to actually also add contextualization, greater literacy, easier findability to those initiatives. Otherwise, these are certain to fail. They are going to be a lot of heavy lifting for not a lot of immediate payoff. All right, and let's talk about the fourth one in this mix. The last one is really for reuse and repurposing data work. And so for savvy organizations, not even just savvy, but organizations that are really data-driven. I talked to some organizations where everybody is in their analytical tools, into their BI applications, and there's just a constant thirst. They are data-driven business, but still there is a lot of wasted effort because they want to be able to reuse and repurpose the flurry of data work that is happening across all of their smart colleagues across different data and analytics, either departments or disciplines inside of an organization. So when you think about that, just even these little images here on the right side of the screen, every color, every dot, every data point, right, is supported by a bunch of data, maybe even a bunch of SQL queries produced on top of that data, which was transformed from its original source data by ETL. So the need to kind of take all that effort that's gone into existing analytical artifacts and other work that's going on and get real benefit from it to make everybody more efficient within that department. So let's take a look at what that looks like, right? So, reuse and repurpose, I have a different angle here on a good first use case. And that's really to solve the next data challenge, the current data challenge, the one right on your immediate horizon in a new way. Because I think it's virtually impossible to reverse engineer all of the, to have that insight into all of the different queries that were used, the intentions that were there, the what caused that data to be created in the way that it was created. That's really hard thing to go back and do. So I think it's really worthwhile to think about how can we show people to work in a new collaborative way. So I really recommend piloting, solving something that exists, a specific problem still, just like we've talked about earlier, and to do that in a more transparent, collaborative way. Data.world has some really great data catalog functionality to give this to where you can see not only on the right that I can see a problem space we call a project, where we can be collaborating together in a transparent way about the meaning of what we're looking for in this particular analytical problem, but also to show the queries, the data sets, and even if you see in the bottom corner there, the insights that were reached. So everybody knows what happened a week later, but what happens a year later and 2 years later, or when two of those analysts move on to different jobs or different companies? The value of capturing not only the end piece, but the work along the way is a fundamental belief of our organization and something that really pushes organizations forward in a very agile and smart way. So who cares about reuse and repurpose work? Again, back to that classic data catalog audience, especially the data consumers, the data analysts, the data scientists, and I like to say, and the people who pay them. Because as much as can be conserved, right, by this workforce, as much knowledge that can be maintained and be searched and found and understood, and as much as those resources can produce more and more insight and do less and less drudgery, is really the goal of almost all analytics leaders. And even data producers really, really like this capability and these use cases, because then they have insight into how their data is being used, right? Whereas in a lot of scenarios at companies, people ask for access to data, it is granted based on the terms given, and then who knows what happens after that a report is produced. So there's a lot of benefits to working in these very transparent ways. Okay, so that was the 4 use cases we talked about, starting everything from, we're just trying to get people very literate and smart about what data we have and why we have it, and what variations of it we have, all the way through those intermediate use cases, all the way up to really working collaboratively and in an agile fashion together. All right, I will be back in a bit to talk a little bit more about how we see the agile data governance concepts evolving. And for now, I'm going to pass it to Amy, who is our resident expert on how to actually go about building use cases.
Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate you sharing those potential first use cases and understanding who really cares about it and who's going to have stake in the game. I wanted to spend a little time now about how to get started. And working with clients and kicking off, there's a few things we want you to keep in mind. So first thing is assessing what's currently happening in your organization. You want to observe and consider things. The first piece being the people, identifying the different groups of people and their roles within enterprise, not just people who work deeply with data, but all people who might encounter that and how they might potentially use the data catalog. The second is inventory, inventorying those initial data sources, know which ones matter and why they matter. The third thing is thinking about priority. The priority of tables and reports. Stuart alluded to this. It's what things do people ask for all the time? Let's get a list of those and understand why people are asking that. The next thing is to pinpoint. Pinpoint what are frequently used terms and acronyms and abbreviations. I can't tell you how many times clients tell me that they go into a meeting and the first half of the meeting is really just going through defining those things all over again to make sure we have a shared common vocabulary. The next thing is user stories for your data workers. Understanding how they currently work for data with data and how they aspire to work for data, and getting those stories written out so we understand them. And then the last piece is the impact and influence. Determine what data impacts and influences your key organizational goals and objectives. What are you working on? What is the whole organization aligning to and trying to achieve? There's data that lines up with that. That's the great place to start and be impactful. The next thing to think about is you want to really start gathering what I call the essential elements, things that can really help launch and plan and launch your data catalog. The first thing is you want to start small, something that you can get your hands wrapped around. Don't try to do it all at once. That's going to be the first thing that people want to do, is inventory or catalog everything. But that you lose some of the impact in that. So start with something that's discrete. The next thing is target the right team. And by that, what I mean is understand who is strategically important to the data catalog. Who do you need and who are nice to have? So in this case, you might think about who is your data architect? Who's your program manager for a data catalog as a whole? Who are your data engineers and who are your data stewards? Thinking through who might need to come in and join as we build out this first use case. Next, you want to identify your champions. These are people that are really growth mindset. They're innovative in how they innovative about how they look at data and what is possible when you unlock understanding and discovery of that data. The next is you want to set expectations. And this is probably one of the harder pieces, is to help people understand we're going to start small, we're going to test, and we're going to learn. We'll be agile as we iterate. And what we learn in this first use case will apply and becomes the foundation for subsequent use cases. And then the last thing is gathering business insights. All through this whole process, we ask you to be curious and just work on discovering what is the impact of what we're going to be able to put in the data catalog, and why is that important to people, and what will happen in the future state when they have this kind of access and discovery. The next thing I'll leave you with is thinking about this image. When data problems are big, the very first thing you want to do is start small, like I mentioned. It's a big staircase, and you can get to the top by taking one step at a time. But each step you take, you're achieving several things in that first step or each step. First, it's the early win that your team shows the possibility and how potentially things can move quicker. The next is that your previous work becomes the foundation for you to take that next step, and you make it easier for people to climb all the steps behind you. It's really a great image, and one that I think is really important as you build your data catalog, and one that we encourage teams to think about often. So now, if you think about all that's the how of a data catalog and these use cases, the next thing I want to talk about is the when. When should you get involved? When is the right time? It's the trends and the innovations. It's what are the themes that we're seeing that encourages people to move forward with a data catalog. And I think there are 4 of them. The first one is, consider that 76% of IT executives right now are concerned about data sprawl. And I think this is largely because of remote work. It was a necessary shift that we all made, but it's definitely contributing and compounding to the sprawl. The next one, 82% of organizations are struggling to retain knowledge due to decline in average tenure and turnover. It's a reality and it's a fact. And it's critical that we pass along this institutional knowledge and these learnings. The third one, 97% of CIOs struggle with content management due to files and unsecured devices, data loss, and mismanaged permissions. This one, I think, echoes a little of the sentiment of what happens when you no longer are working just in an office, and it is becoming remote, and it's becoming wider and broader about where all that data lives. And then the last one is 51% of organizations will invest in automation to manage content and data security. Every customer we talk to right now, this is top of mind. And with that, let's pass it over to Stuart to consider other things for our data catalog.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So the last piece that we're going to talk about today is really the evolution of data catalog use cases, give you a little food for thought on how we think organizations can really apply a lot of the things that Amy and I have talked about in this session in a very holistic way through what we call agile data governance. And this has been a very popular theme as many organizations have struggled through their first rounds of data governance, struggled to kind of get the levels of adoption and participation, some of the things I mentioned earlier. So, well, first, let's move backwards by talking a little bit about the traditional data governance model. Many of you may be actively engaged in it or very familiar with it. It starts at the top. We have enterprise information management. We have things like data governance groups and data management. Those break out into councils, right, with data stewards and trustees, and you have architects and engineers on the IT side, and they're all collaborating around definitions and enforcements and controls. And that's really been the focus, right? And then the world gets at the bottom of that tower to those key data consumers that you see once they've kind of been vetted, controlled, understood, and typically any permissions would then flow back up this pyramid towards the top, depending upon the sensitivity and the severity and the uniqueness of the use case, to then get the permission back down, right? And that can create an ivory tower, right? It can create a blocker to actually what you want to achieve, which is data governance. Because what happens is if that ivory tower gets too tall and too onerous to engage with, then what happens is people will start to go around that ivory tower. They will find other ways. That's human nature. And so it's a really difficult to sustain model. It can slow down your pace of innovation, which for many organizations is just not an option today. And that's really where a lot of data governance initiatives go to die, is they just have too much overhead. You're requiring too much out of people who this is not even their day job. So we really think it's time, to work together to be more like these people, right? Building the house together, seeing what each other are doing in real time, understanding how this works, and having a shared way of going about that work. So when we talk about that definition of data governance, what do you think of? Do you think of, really the defensive scenarios of risk avoidance and compliance, right? But really what we think it is about the rules of cooperation and collaboration, or put more succinctly, the process of doing data and analytics work together. Too often this is about who has control, who's giving access, who wants things, who has things, right? And this is really to think more collaboratively about how do we work together in real time or near real time in a productive way. And our methodology is really based on the concepts of agile software development. For those of you on the technical side or near the technical side, you may be very aware that a lot of software development has moved away from the elements on the left, classically away from really focusing on processes and tools, comprehensive documentation first, right? Like let's really dot every I and cross every T, and then we'll go build something. That contract negotiation phase, so to really, again, plan that big waterfall approach of how we will go about work and how we will structure the next 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be of our business, and then following that plan. Often, as we know, come hell or high water. And so the world started to move to agility, and that agility really applies as much to data as it does to software, in our opinion. There's very similar, analogous conclusions to be drawn there, that we should favor the individuals working with the data and their interactions, that's really where the important stuff is happening, that we want to get to working data insights as fast as possible. That's what we want to bias towards, working insights, and through consumer collaboration, not telling people what is going to happen, but collaborating with them around what they need and balancing that with the responsibilities to the organization to also protect the things that need to be protected. And then being very responsive to change. Now, the world is changing very, very quickly. It's a cliche to say at this point, but especially the data world, the tools, the skills, the languages, they are evolving at extremely fast rates. So almost more important than anything else is being built for flexibility and for agility to change as these landscapes evolve and as the requirements undoubtedly will evolve over the next few years of your business. So what we recommend, rather than that traditional model, is a more balanced model, right? Switching less just about defense and thinking also about offense, about really broadly data literacy, about the umbrella of data within your organization and how well it can be understood, really balancing underneath that the needs for data governance, so the needs for propriety, for doing things properly, and then also unleashing the power of your data broadly so that your organization can gain insights and really move at the speed of business today, right? And so we really think that's really the balanced paradigm that needs to take place, is how do we democratize responsibly and how do we balance those needs within the business to get the best outcomes? So for us, if we look at it from a people perspective, we really believe, when we go back to that gap between the data producers who understand the data and where it lives and data consumers who need to deliver the correct analysis, we need to utilize that data for business results, right? Is how do we bridge that gap, right? And we really think this needs maybe even just a new role or a new way of thinking about the role of the person that sits between them. And we like to call that a data product manager. Now, names are not super important, but using a different name really helps alert people to a different connotation of what that role is meant to do. So it's not only about the data requirements and about using the data correctly, but also just making sure that data actually gets used, that the data that we produce, the data that we buy, the data that we bring in, right? That it's being used appropriately and that we can build new data products as the needs of the data consumers evolve, that we're not just stuck in a mindset of technologies and the what's possible, but really thinking about what's necessary and problem solving. And so that's more an elevated role, we think, that, than just a simple data steward as the older model really considers them. And that then allows these entities to really do it the right way, right? To curate information, to audit who's using it and how and why and what they need, to govern those changes to make sure they happen appropriately, document them so that we're better able to curate and understand data as we go forward, right? So really, kind of elevating this role of the person that stands between these different needs within the business and can really translate both the requirements technically and the needs of the business. And so what does that result in? And we think this really just helps organizations kind of make clear in their minds what we're talking about. In an older model of data governance, right, we're going to start out, we're going to form our council, we're going to define the standards and principles that we need to adhere to. Then we're going to develop policies that enforce those standards and principles. We're going to build workflows to get all the appropriate checks and boxes ticked by all of the appropriate responsible people before any data is accessed or changes are made. And then we will roll out kind of this new data governance paradigm potentially within the data catalog. And then we can spend a long time then figuring out how to refine that model that we spent all of this time working on. But what Data.World really believes in, what we think, where we see the market going, is the need to move more rapidly and to be more available to change, right? To be really capable of understanding that you will learn and grow. And so looking at how quickly you can move through and accomplish use cases, measure what you did, learn and iterate for the next use case, and to really move effectively through that together with data analysts and data governance folks and the business folks, rather than really, again, starting in this very waterfall approach. So just some food for thought today on how you think about your use cases, why use cases are so important and how to really distill things down into iterative units that you can really work your way through.
Stuart and I have covered a great deal today, both the potential use cases, the how and the when, and then recently the principles of agile data governance. Let me see if I can distill this down into 3 key takeaways. So, first one, start small and iterate. Resist the urge to do it all and make it perfect. That's a myth. Start small. The second, understand the core motivations behind your theme and who cares about it. Do the discovery work ahead, because you'll reference this back again and again as you go through standing up a data catalog. What are the overall objectives and who really cares about it? And then third, take the time to pick a really good first use case. Be intentional about this. This will be the showcase, as we referenced earlier, about how and why your data catalog is being stood up in your organization. And then last, I'll say, with that, if you're interested in learning more, please visit our data.world resources page. Lots of information there. Stuart and I thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our point of view on impactful use cases and how to kick off your data catalog. Thank you. Bye.